Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. My guest today on Better Than I Found It is former Auburn First-Team All-American and 2002 Curtis Cup member Courtney Trimble. Courtney and I talk about her relationship with Hall of Fame coach Kim Evans, first playing for Kim at Auburn and later coaching with her at Auburn. Courtney also describes how Evans prepared her to be an effective head coach, first at UCF and later at Louisville. Though now retired from coaching, Courtney has stayed connected with the profession with two initiatives. One, a company she created called Fore Hire, and the other developing a mentorship program for the WGCA. Courtney's a great gal and a credit to the game. I hope you enjoy. Okay, Better Than I Found It, faithful. I want to introduce my guest today, a former Auburn golfer and retired college golf coach, Courtney Trimble. Courtney, thank you so much for joining me on Better Than I Found It today.
Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. Well, you've got a couple of initiatives in your life right now, other than being a mother and a wife and all of that. You've got a lot going on with Fore Hire, which is a company you created, and the WGCA Women's Golf Coaches Association mentorship program. Both of those are things you're very active in, but I don't want to get to those right now. I want to talk about those a little bit later, and I'm very interested to find out more about both of those. But I want to talk a little bit to start with about your place in the world of competitive golf, because you grew up in Atlanta. You were a really, really good junior player. You grew up at Atlanta Athletic Club, which and you took your first golf lesson from Hall of Fame coach Kim Evans back in when you were very, very young. So that's kind of an interesting way to get into the game. But how were you at Atlanta Athletic Club when your parents weren't even really golfers? How did that come about?
Well, I was very fortunate to grow up at the athletic club. We had amazing guys and that were instructors and golf professionals early on. Very few women, girls playing. But I had two older brothers. They kind of dabbled in golf. My parents were not wealthy, but were able to join the athletic club through like a membership drive back in the 80s. And they would drop me off in the summer. I would play golf. I would go to the pool. I would take a tennis lesson. You just lived there, and it was an amazing place to grow up. And so I was fortunate to be able to do that throughout my life and each summer. And then I kind of started to progress from there. But it was a wonderful childhood and an amazing place to be a part of.
I can imagine an iconic place like that that's hosted men's majors, women's majors, the U.S. Junior, all kinds of championships. A great place and a wonderful golf course, by the way. But you took one of your early golf lessons was from Hall of Fame Auburn coach Kim Evans. She told me it was about age 7. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was around the Women's US Open. I think they were doing a clinic there, and Vicky Getz Ackerman was there doing sort of another clinic. I think she was a 16-year-old phenom at the time, and then all the little girls that were there got to take lessons, and Kim was one of the lead instructors. And so, yeah, life certainly came full circle for me getting to play for her at Auburn.
Yeah, Kim, legendary coach. I still feel like she could coach today. That's how good I think she is. I think she would be just as relevant as she ever was, but she's not coaching anymore. And I did talk to her by text message before we had this podcast. How did Kim get you to Auburn? I know it's only an hour and a half, basically, from Auburn to Atlanta, so it's not that far of a drive, and it's straight down a highway, so it's like right there. But I know as good a player as you were, you had to be interested in some other schools, and I know other schools were interested in you. How did the recruitment process look for you?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I grew up a Georgia Tech fan. My dad played football at Georgia Tech. They didn't have women's golf, obviously. So I cast a really wide net. I went for visits to Florida and Tennessee, North Carolina. And my last visit was to Auburn, and it was during the week, and that was back when everybody took an official visit, and you went for the whole football weekend. And I ended up going to Auburn for like a Sunday night and a Monday, nothing special. And I had actually never been to Auburn. as many years as I had lived in Atlanta. My uncle went to Auburn, but I just wasn't that familiar with it. Ended up going for a weekday visit, and I just stepped on campus and thought, you know what, this really feels like home. And Kim had obviously recruited me, and I lost a really tight match on like the 21st hole at the U.S. Junior Girls that summer, and she stayed, and it was pitch black, and she stayed and watched me cry, after I lost the match. Um, and so I think, just her knowing her, and then of course Auburn being close to home, but being really just a special place was really what kind of put it over the edge for me.
Well, it didn't hurt that she was pretty dynamic personality as well. I mean, I can't even imagine, and I'm going to have her on this podcast one day. I just can't believe I haven't done it already. What she could have taught me about recruiting and about how to recruit someone. Now, bringing you in on a Sunday afternoon and a Sunday, Monday visit wasn't ideal. Maybe she knew something we didn't know, but she did get you to Opelika to Auburn, and that's pretty impressive, I think. I've got good memories in Auburn. The men's golf team, when I was an assistant at Oklahoma State, we won the national championship there in
Yeah.
2000. Went there as an assistant with the women in '04 and finished runner-up, and went there as an assistant at Alabama for Jay Sewell for the regional, and we won there. So I feel like I should take my team to Auburn, Alabama more often. As good as they are, I still feel like we'd play well there. But so an amazing campus, great place to go to school. Let me tell you what Kim said about you when I texted her and I said, I'm going to have Courtney on this podcast. And she just jumped right in immediately and said, Courtney was a leader the day she stepped on campus. The team followed her lead. She is fun, smart, and gifted with people and with golf. And she had a great freshman year, but she said you kind of went into a lull where you didn't play as well your sophomore and junior seasons. So I want you to talk about, first of all, is she pretty accurate on most of those things? Are you humbled by that? But from there, how did you come out of that slump you had for 2 years?
Well, I so appreciate her saying all of those things. She put me in a position to be successful and to be a leader for sure. Um, and I did a player my freshman year. I played every tournament. I think I had like a 75 scoring average, which back then was decent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for whatever reason, I couldn't draw it back my sophomore year. No reason at all. It just, as all of us that have played at a high level, some part of your game goes. Well, my entire game went. And I remember that fall at Tennessee, I made a 6-footer to break 90.
Mm.
And that was, walked off the green and thought, I shanked 2 balls during, I mean, it was bad. And I didn't know what to do. I spent so many nights in the hotel rooms right before the tournaments, like not sleeping, and it just was for no reason. And she gave me every resource. She put me in touch with Bob Rotella. She gave me every resource to try to get out of it. And ultimately, it was on me. It was what was going through my head, and I just had to work really hard to get out of it. But she definitely believed in me and stood behind me. And I just woke up one morning and decided I'm not going to beat myself anymore. And and
Mhm.
I had to dig it out of the dirt, and I had to work really, really, really hard. I remember chipping like hundreds of balls, and Jason Duffner was on the men's team at the time, and I remember him walking over to me and saying like, just keep doing it. Like it's not going to go away overnight, but it was exhausting, but it was so worth it. Because by the end of my senior year, it took me about a full year to get out of it, but I became a player for it. I never would have been as good as I was had I not gone through that. But it was a
You know,
lot.
it was a lot. And she told me that you came into her office and said, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm tired of beating myself. I don't want that to happen. And she said you set some really lofty goals. So let me tell you what the goals are. She said you wanted to be a first team all SEC. You wanted to be a first team All American. You wanted to be on the SEC honor roll, and you wanted to be on the Curtis Cup team. Now, for somebody who's having a hard time breaking 80, to come in with all these goals, I'm sure Kim was going, wow, she really wants to do this. But she believed in you. And you mentioned that. She did not give up on you, which I thought was great. I had a player, Jonathan Moore, who ended up winning the national championship at Oklahoma State. He's coaching at the University of Oklahoma now. who really couldn't break 85 his freshman year. And a year later, he won the last three tournaments of the season, including the national championship, and we won the national championship. And so I know it's possible for somebody to completely turn it around. And you went from not breaking 80, probably not traveling, to actually being a first-team All-American. How did you do that? And I mean, your team finished second that year in the national championship. So you're obviously your upswing in your game must have helped the team. But how did you get yourself out of that other than working hard and you had a coach who believed in you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started with the hard work and going to practice every day with the thought process of like, I'm not going to beat myself anymore. And I'm here. And I knew why I was going to practice. It was not to not screw up anymore. It was to be better and to not be just every day for 2 years with that mindset. I also had really good players on my team. And they pushed me to be better. I was competitive. I'm still competitive. I wanted to be better. I was tired of, you know, being the worst player on the team. And so those probably two things combined, along with support. I worked with Chan Reeves at the Atlanta Athletic Club, who's now at Sea Island. He's coached a ton of great players. He spent many hours with me. On the golf course and on the driving range, helping me get through that. But ultimately, I had great support. I worked really hard. I had great teammates that pushed me. And then ultimately, it was what was going on in my own head. So I think all those things combined set me up for success. And I told my parents that too. Decided I wanted to go play in those winter tournaments right before my, senior season. I'm like, I got to go play in these. I want to do this. And I got in my car. They let me, and they go in your car. And I missed some school. But those ultimately allowed me, I think, to end up making the Curtis Cup team that year because I played really well in those tournaments too. So a great support system.
Yeah, that's good. You can't really do it by yourself. You think you can, and everybody thinks they want to, but you do have to have people that now you hold yourself accountable
Yeah.
to these are my results, but you still know you need help. So Kim, I feel like I would love to have played for Kim. But tell me, what was the most inspiring thing she said to you or did for you during those 4 years, do you think? You did say she believed in you. That's pretty inspiring, but is there anything in particular?
I think it was just the day to day. She had a really good way of two things that she did really well is like she held us accountable, but she also knew when to let off the gas. I was at the coaches convention earlier in December, and someone was laughing about. I was in the elevator, asked Kim Evans what did she do for her with her players in the off season. She said nothing. I don't touch them. I let them have their space. From the time we finished until January, she let us be college students. She knew we needed to have some fun and let off some steam. So she did a really good job of like balancing. And I think that's what she did for us. She held us accountable. She also made us love Auburn, and I think when you're playing for something larger than yourself, it becomes a bigger deal. And that's what she did really well. And that's what she gave all of us the opportunity to love Auburn. And everyone that's played for her, I would say, loves Auburn, and she instilled that. And so that was something that she went to Auburn, she believed in Auburn. And so giving all of us that gave us greater purpose when we were on the golf course.
Yeah, I think that's great when a coach makes the experience so important to a young man that he wants to come back for football games or they want to come back and be a part of the university. They want to be at reunions. They're interested in pushing, the refresh button on the live scoring to find out how the team is doing, that type of thing.
Mhm.
And that's built in 4 years of forging a relationship that hopefully lasts a lifetime. One of the things she said about those goals you accomplished, and you accomplished every one of them, was that it was so much fun watching her setting goals, but with a great attitude, it was even more fun for me as a coach. So she knew you were at the bottom of the barrel or, at the bottom and you wanted to do something. You set these lofty goals that were kind of, I mean, like almost unrealistic, but you had a great attitude. And she said that was so much fun watching that.
Well, that's nice because I don't remember always having a great attitude.
Well, she thought you had one, which is great. And I think that speaks to the importance when we're in those low times, and we will all be there.
Yeah.
How you handle those is going to kind of forge your character, and it's gonna create your legacy more than just about anything. So you finished up there and with a great, great first team All-American. Curtis Cup team was great, all of that. How long after your playing career did you decide to become a coach?
I played a couple, let's see, I played about 2.5 years. I got married in that time, and I, she actually called me. The assistant job came open one year, and I said, I'm not ready to give up my own golf game yet. And but I knew ultimately I wanted to do more with golf than just play. I always felt like my purpose was greater than just my own game. And so I didn't take the job that first time she called. And then a year later, she ended up calling back, or thereabouts. It wasn't exactly a year, and said, "Hey, the position's open again." And at that time I had stopped playing. And so I went back, and we all drove in the van down to Baton Rouge, and the team flew back on the private jet, and I drove the van back. I was like, here we go.
I remember one
This is
time at
what it's
Oklahoma
like.
State, the team was playing in Austin, and we had flown down privately, except I had driven down,
Yeah.
and I drove down the two individuals, and one of the guys was going to be leaving from the tournament with his family going someplace, and so we'd have one of those individuals would be back on that private plane, the other one would be riding back in the van with me 8 hours, and they had sort of the last round was the playoff, of the guy who wins is going back on the plane, and the guy who doesn't is riding back with Coach McGraw. And I'll never forget. Oh, that player was a miserable player with me in that van. Oh well. So
Yeah.
about being an assistant. There's a lot of positives, but there's also you pay your dues.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so you have to have had some pride coaching as an assistant coach, your first coaching position at your alma mater for your coach who you played for. I mean, describe that. That must have been a lot of fun.
It was really special. And I loved all of the young women I got to coach. When you're I think a young assistant, you're a good player. You kind of have some credibility that's different. And it was just so fun. We won the SEC championship that first year. You're in the throes as a coach, and Kim's telling me, like, see all those coaches, they're going to run out there and overcoach their kids on the, 17th and 18th holes. We're just going to sit back here and we're just going to let them do their thing. We're not going to. So, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's water on the last hole. The control person, and he's like, and ultimately that's what happened. We end up winning that championship. And it was just so fun. And she taught me so much. She just, from the day I set foot on campus, she gave me a lot of responsibility. And she just she set me up for success to be, a good head coach because of what she taught me from day one, coming on
So
campus.
you mentioned that before we did this podcast that she kind of prepped you to be a successful college golf coach by giving you more responsibility. I think it's tough for some head coaches to let the reins go a little bit and let the assistant coach do the work. But if you've got a good assistant, why wouldn't you let him do that?
Yeah,
He or she.
she let me look at the budget with her. She let me made sure that I sat in on meetings with, our administrator to talk about why she did this and that. And she certainly was overseeing things and making sure they were done correctly. I remember one year somebody's NIL, or not NIL, they're NLI. It is.
Yes.
Was done incorrectly, and she was not happy. She's like, that is not how we do things around here, and so you learn the hard way. But I was there for 3 years, and when I left to go to UCF, I knew how to run every single facet of the program, and there wasn't one thing that I felt like I was unprepared for. So because of that, I didn't feel like I was sort of a deer in headlights. Hard conversations with players she let me sit in on. And I always tell this to assistants now, like, you're not going to agree with everything. And you think, oh, I'll do that way different. But the reality is when you sit in the seat, and you know this as a head coach, it's different. And having that preparation, it's so hard to make hard decisions, to tell kids they're not going, to talk to parents, all the things that coaches have. And if you're not prepared for that, it makes it that much harder.
Yeah, that's our job as head coaches is to try to prepare our assistant coaches for the challenges that we know they're going to face. They don't know what it's going to feel like. And I always told Ryan Blagg that he was my first assistant here at Baylor for 6 years, and he got the job at Louisville. I
Right.
think he was he got that job just a few years after you had left,
Yeah.
not too long after you had left. But I was saying, Ryan, I can't explain this to you right now as well as it needs to be explained because until you sit in this chair, you won't know exactly what I'm saying. I can give you the words, but until you feel what it feels like. So it's a different feel. And but it must have been a great experience. My experiences with Mike Holder, not all of them were fun, but he did prepare me to be a head coach. There's no question. Before we move to UCF and Louisville and just those experiences, Ryan Cabbage, good buddy of mine who played at Auburn, he followed you as the assistant coach there on the women's side. And he and I have so many fun stories about because I was a women's assistant coach and a women's head coach for 1 year. And it's just a different deal. We guys, we don't always get it right. We don't always get it right.
That's great perspective for you know, men to coach women. I actually wish more women coached men because I think you would take that. I always said I would love to coach a men's program because I think you just have a different perspective and you're coaching different things. You're maybe, and you're dealing with different problems, but so fun.
Well, when I was a women's head coach, I'll never forget, I was trying to coach them exactly as I would coach men, and that wasn't working. And it was a parent of one of my former men's players, and it was my two best players, Karin Sodine and Annie Young, who both basically set me down and said, "Listen, coach, you got to do this differently. This You're a great coach, but you've got to figure it. We're different." And now those happen to be probably two of the easiest females I'd ever seen to coach
Yeah.
because they were spot on with everything. But on the other hand, I learned a lot of good lessons from players, about how to coach women. And I know that Kim Evans coached on the men's side
He did.
for a while, and I just firmly think I think guys would play for a woman. I really do. I don't see why they wouldn't. And they're going to give a great perspective. I know this. If I was I know that a lot of great women's basketball coaches are men, but I think there would be a lot of really, really quality women golf coaches on the men's side. That's what I think.
I agree. I think it's a different perspective, for sure, and is a benefit to both parties to have kind of a different perspective.
Absolutely. Do you ever keep in touch with her? Do you talk to Ryan Cabbage ever? He's at Charlotte.
Oh, I do all the time, and I just caught up with him at the coaches convention. And that's what one thing Auburn does is keeps people together. And he did the women's coaching after I left, but we were coaching assistant coaches together. And so we had many, many, many conversations on how to do things better. And we were helping to get the new facility done at the same time. So we were working on projects and, love collaborating with Cabo. And he's obviously done a great job and love to keep in touch with him.
Yeah, he's one of the great college golf coaches for sure. So take me through the two experiences. I think about 5 years at UCF and about 5 years at Louisville. Is that ballpark?
I was 10 years, 3 years at UCF and
Okay.
almost 7 at Louisville. But yeah, 10
10,
years
10
overall.
total. Anything stand out in those two head coaching experiences now that you're out of coaching and you've seen it from a player perspective, an assistant coaching perspective, and now as a somebody who's still connected to college golf but outside of college golf. So what do you think were the great things you learned during those two experiences?
Well, I went to UCF, and we were not a Power Five. We had different resources. We are kind of up and coming. That was before, UCF is way different now than it was then. But it was a really good, and I followed Nick Kleiner and I almost switched. Like he came from UCF to Auburn and vice versa. But we had different problems. And I learned quickly um, what you do as a coach. It's how you make the players feel. We maybe weren't flying on private jets and doing all these other crazy things that we might have been doing at Auburn. But at the same time, I didn't ever let the players know that we didn't have things. But we had other things that maybe other teams didn't have. We were able to practice every day in the winter. And so I learned quickly that you have different problems and different positives and how you're going to spend those through the recruiting process and with players was really important, really valuable. And then when I went to Louisville, it was completely different. how I had never stepped foot. I didn't even know where Louisville was on a map when I went there. And so, but it's an amazing place. And again, you're selling different things and different challenges. And all of a sudden I've never lived north of Atlanta at that point in my life, dealing with the winter. But again, you start to flip things like, well, hey, we can work on our technique. And so as a coach, you have all these different, I loved the different challenges and different things at each program. And that's probably what I love the most about my career, was that I was able to go places and sort of build on different things. For me, that was really fun. Like going into a place, the first 3 years were just the most fun at every place.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my first 3 years here at Baylor. Just we Greg Priest had left me some good players for sure, and everything was solid. But it was just fun, a new challenge. I'd been at Oklahoma State and Alabama before. But we're talking about careers. So these first like three coaching situations you took at Auburn as an assistant, at UCF and Louisville as head coaches, all your husband Billy followed you to all three of those positions, and then it kind of flipped because as you were finishing up at Louisville, Billy took a job in Chicago with Callaway Golf. So talk about uh, exiting, stage left, if you will.
Yeah, he really let me follow my career. And when you're in a partnership and a marriage, that's what you do. It's really hard to follow both people's careers if they are location based, right? Like a coaching job is, or a sales job is. So he let me follow my career. And he had always been kind of in and around the golf industry, and his started to take off. He was the Callaway sales rep in Louisville. And we could have stayed there, and he could have built his career there, and both of us could have built our careers. But ultimately, they asked him to take over a kind of a floundering territory in Chicago. And I had just had my second child and thought, you know what? Sure, you've sacrificed a lot. Your career is taking off. You want this opportunity? Let's do it. And I'll find other ways to stay plugged into golf, and do other things. And if I'm being fair, the first 6 months, I thought, oh, I got to do something, um, but the reality is it's the best thing that happened to both of us. And sometimes you just have to ride out the waves for the good to come through. And now I'm glad we did it. It's been an amazing experience for him and for our family and for myself. And I have found other ways to stay involved, and they've been just as rewarding. So it's been
Let's,
fun.
let's talk about those. I mean, your husband's job now is with Titleist, and that brought you all to Denver. But now let's talk about the ways you have stayed connected to college golf or to the golf industry, period. You created a company called Fore Hire, and it's a company that I guess you'll explain to me, but it helps place women in the golf industry, in the all parts of the golf industry. How did you come up with the idea for this? What inspired it, and what all services does your company provide?
When I was leaving coaching, at Louisville, I am sort of a big idea person. I always thought, what is happening to all of these players, whether that they played for me or I recruited them? I thought, oh my gosh, they're amazing. Where are they going? Why are they not staying in the golf business? Why are they maybe not advancing their careers, getting better jobs? Everyone would say, oh, you're a former golfer, you're hireable, and I thought, well, we're not seeing that. It's harder to find jobs when you're a golfer and you don't have internship experience and all these things. How do I be part of the solution for that? And so, after several years of sort of sitting on the idea, actually, it was my husband that finally said, either start the company or get a job. Like, stop talking about it. But I believe so much in golfers, and our goal is to help former collegiate golfers and professional golfers advance their careers, post-playing careers. And so we do that. We do that through education and sort of teaching them what opportunities are out there, what intangible skills they have. We help both both men and women, but we definitely have a women's initiative. And ultimately, we help we have partnered with a lot of organizations, so we have a direct line to connect the talent to. So we sort of make that introduction. And from there, I always tell people, I can't get you a job, but I can get you maybe a seat at the table. And so that's really what we do. We've had over 100 people get hired into the industry in the last, we've just finished 3 years. And so it's been really fun to be on the other side, but it's also been amazing to see what opportunities are in the golf business. I think a lot of women think, well, I'm going to exit the golf industry because I don't want to be a teaching pro or a golf coach or an assistant pro. And the reality of the golf industry is there is so much more than that now. And there are so many ways to leverage your golf career into something really, really spectacular. So it's been super fun. And every day we're creating new initiatives and doing new things. And it's just been a lot of fun.
Well, has COVID, I know, kind of gave a shot in the arm to the golf industry because when everybody was having to stay indoors, you could do golf outside. So how much has COVID affected opportunities, like you're saying this, in the golf business?
Oh, I think it's affected it hugely. I think it made the golf industry recognize the number of hours people were working, maybe the salaries being commensurate with other roles. How do we keep people? How do we advance their careers? How do we create? Golf is so cool now for every across a lot of different sectors. So it's really created a lot of different unique opportunities that I think just wouldn't have been available before. It's really been fun to watch it grow into so many different, the simulate off course entertainment, other ways, and people just are excited about the game that have never been excited before. And I think it also brought people back that maybe were college golfers or high level players that kind of drifted away from the game. They brought it back and they brought their families in, and I think it's just been really powerful for the game of golf.
If I could simplify it, when I was coming through and playing 3 years of mini tour golf, really the only option in the golf industry was to go into the golf shop and become an assistant pro and go through the apprentice program, and that was it. There was nothing else. Um, but even that part of the industry has changed a lot with, I mean, it's just not quite the same as it was 40 or 45 years ago. So now you're seeing that there's a whole lot more opportunities out there that in the business of golf that you help people get spots with, and especially former players.
Yeah, I think the golf knowledge, being able to really there are a lot of positions where you have to know the game. Just and so it's so helpful. I've placed women into turf grass positions that
Mm.
are selling, sprinkler systems or piping in the industry. I mean, those are not jobs you would ever think but they are golf aligned. They're incredibly wonderful careers. Um, and that golf background just sets them up for success right out of the gate because they know the game and they can speak the language. And those are things that just off the top of my head, but there's hundreds more of other types of jobs that are in the industry that people just wouldn't even think of.
I think people in the industry know that hiring a golfer is probably a good thing. He or she was probably disciplined. He or she probably set goals.
Oh yeah.
He or she, just all of that is very highly driven and very competitive. So,
Yep.
yeah, it's really wonderful. Well, another initiative that I want to talk about is the WGCA mentorship program. I didn't know about this. I didn't know you were involved with it. Jay Goble told me you were, and then I remember a few years back when Ryan Cabbage first became president of the GCAA, and he said, "Let's get this program started." And we thought about it, but we never did do it. Talk about that program. How has it worked on the women's side, and why has it been successful?
Yeah, I was fortunate to get to start the mentorship program when I left coaching kind of on a contract basis for the WGCA. And it's, what I took some kind of tips from some other coaches association across the country. And what we do is really pair up 3 to 4 coaches. So we have a lead mentor, an intermediate mentor, and a mentee. And now we've got so many new coaches coming into the business. We have actually 2 mentees in each group. So they're typically groups of 4. And they meet once a month and they just have a conversation like this, either over phone call or Zoom. And they're sharing ideas. They're talking about best practices. We provide them kind of a list of topics, but ultimately it's a way to just connect with other coaches in the industry that you probably would never connect with before, and share wins and losses and challenges, and know that you're all kind of rowing in the same direction, maybe just in a separate boat. And it's really been powerful We started with about 95. We've got over 160 participating this year. And the feedback has been great. And I think the one thing it does is, one, it connects you with people, coaches across the country that you wouldn't ever connect with. And two, there's people that have been there before you. So if it can accelerate your learning curve, right? If I can be in a mentorship group with Mike McGraw and you've already experienced something and you can tell me that, and I don't have someone in my career or life that has that knowledge, then all of a sudden I become a better coach faster, or I stay in the industry. I'm not facing these challenges alone, and I think that that's, especially this day and time for coaches, is really important. There's so many things going on that are unknown and uncharted territories that it's really powerful to be, even if it's just monthly, to have this conversation with people that are feeling and experiencing the same things.
Yeah, a lot of times you think you're suffering through this thing that nobody else is suffering through. And I remember when I spoke at the GCA Coaches Convention in 2016. It was Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock, terrible time slot. And I thought there's not going to be anybody in here. There were about 350 coaches all total, and 30 of them came over from the WGCA to listen to me. But the biggest impact I got, and that was before I had written the book Better Than I Found It, but the biggest feedback I got from so many coaches was, it was like you were just talking to me. It's like you were describing all of these dark times in your career, and it was literally what I had already gone through or was going through. So I think that's the great thing about your mentorship program is a veteran coach has probably experienced every single thing that this young coach is going through. So describe that, because that to me is the great value of that program.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's just letting someone know what you're experiencing is part of the job and it's okay and you'll get through it. Don't quit today.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is going to be better. And of course, we've all been. I was talking to a coach the other day and she's, kind of working through some things. And she says, I'll probably call you back in 3 months after we've won a tournament and be like, this is the greatest job ever. And so it's just part of coaching. The highs are real high and the lows are real low. And if you don't have somebody to go through them with, I was fortunate. I'm still being coached by Kim Evans. I probably talk to her on a bi-weekly basis. I had her throughout my career to call and say, what do I do? Or is this normal? And if you don't have somebody to talk to that's been there, like you said, it's really hard. And it's really hard to advance your career. And so we hope that the mentorship program does that, and continues to grow relationships across the country for just, I think it's more important than ever for coaches to pour into each other now.
Well, I'm going to actually try to get that initiative going on the men's side. I'm no longer with the GCAA, but as far as a board member. So I just think it's a great program. I'm glad you talked to me about it, and maybe we can get some people excited about doing it on the men's side as well. So speaking of mentorship and sort of advice giving, I ask this question to almost every coach that I talk to on this podcast. And right now you're about the 234th straight Monday. So I've got a
Gosh.
good streak going, but a lot of those have been coaches. And one of the questions that I've asked that's been pretty consistent has been, what's the best piece of advice that you ever received from another coach? Could be an opposing coach, somebody you compete against, that really transformed the way you coach the game or the way you look at coaching.
Well, a big shift in my career was I had my, for women, you have a baby, you think, oh my gosh, what's next? Or how am I going to do this? All of a sudden, my team has been, at the forefront of everything. Now I've got this third party to take into consideration. And I had just had my first child and I was at a tournament in North Carolina. We're standing on the tee, freezing at Greensboro, if you've ever been there. And
I've been there.
um, I kind of thought, of course, my kid's homesick. I'm out on the road with my team. I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? And I was talking to Stacy Slobotnik at Michigan State, and I said to her, Stacy, I just don't know if I can do this. How did you do this? And she looked at me. I will never forget it.
Hmm.
She looked at me and I don't know if she stuck her finger in my face, but she might have. And she said, you can do this, and this is how you're going to do this. And she said, you are the boss of your program. She gave me how I could be successful as a mom and as a coach. And she kind of just laid it out there for me. And she's like, you can do this, and this is how you're gonna, that's why you have an assistant. You have to give some things off. And she laid it out for me as to how I could be. And she may as well have slapped me in the face. Um, but as soon as she said that to me, I was like, you're right, I can do this. And I left that tournament. Um, and it completely changed the course of how I thought about being a mom and being a coach. And being a mom made me a better coach because when I was there, I was present. And so, I think women and men who have families, but women have different challenges. That's not an unknown fact that we kind of manage households and other things, but it really made me realize I can be successful at both. And it made me realize that women coaches that are moms can be more successful. And if you look at the coaches on the women's side that have kids, the Ann Walkers, the Laura Inellos, and I think for the industry in general, it's not a downside. It makes you you prioritize things. It gives the kids on your team balance, right? Hey, I'm going to go spend time with my family. I'm not going to be here coaching you 24 hours a day. You need to have balance too. And I think that's what it taught me. But, you know, that's one thing that sticks out in my mind from a competing coach that, I will never forget and really change the course of my career.
Well, good news or good kudos to Stacy for doing that for you. But it reminds me in our profession that guys and gals really are very giving of what they know. I can remember Buddy Alexander at Florida. I can remember Jim Brown at Ohio State. I can remember John Fields at Texas. I can remember a lot of coaches that were very successful. And when I asked a question, oh yeah, here, sure, absolutely. And I could name 100 that have done it through the years. And I've tried to do that as a head coach, to think back on those times when a coach was good to me and a coach gave me information that helped. So I love hearing that. Sounds like to me, a lot of young ladies need to hear that advice when they have a child.
Well, it's hard, I think you think you have to choose, and the reality is in most cases you don't. You can be a successful coach, but if you're trying to do things exactly the same way you did with prior to having kids, it's not going to work. But being a successful coach and mom is something I think young women need to see. Like, hey, you can do both, and you can be successful and have a great marriage and raise a great kid. And it's so wonderful. The one thing I do probably wish is that my kids were still around college teams,
Mhm.
a little bit more. My oldest son is turning 13 today, and his first 6 years were around the team, and he held the trophy, and he's super competitive, and I think that's part of the reason why is he was around college athletes all the time. Even they say that you're kind of who you are by the time you're 7, and I think a lot of that shaped his life really early on.
And his name is Owen, and you're at a competition of his right now. Where are you?
Yeah, we're actually in Steamboat. When we moved to Illinois, there was a ski jump about 20 minutes. If you've ever seen the movie Eddie the Eagle, there's this Nordic ski jump about 20 minutes from our house. And my husband loved to downhill ski. And so he took him out there when he was 7, and the rest is history. So we are chasing ski jumps across the West and the Midwest. And eventually he'll probably be traveling all over the world. It's very common in Norway and European countries, but very similar to golf, an individual sport, but you have your little club that you're kind of sort of a team part of. The smallest movement makes the biggest difference in how you jump and how you perform, and it's certainly very mental. You're sitting at the top of the jump, probably having the same thoughts you're having over a driver, but he loves it. He's passionate about it. He's a golfer also, um, and yeah, it's a lot of fun traveling
That's
around with him.
that's great. Well, the last question I want to ask you before we finish here is, what do you miss most about coaching? I don't want that to be a negative question, but there's got to be something about coaching that you miss. Now, you may have hit on it before. What do you think?
I think there's two things I miss. I definitely miss the competition, the last, 9 holes of a tournament being down the stretch, especially in the spring. feeling those tournament nerves and seeing people be successful in those moments, or having to pick yourself back up after you've, not been successful. So I would definitely think the competition, I've certainly missed that part of it. And then the relationships, the day-to-day relationships, both with the players, somebody coming into your office and having to talk through a challenge, but the day-to-day relationships with the players, and certainly with my fellow coaches. I loved going to tournaments and seeing friends, and now I'm sort of scratching that itch through helping people find their career, coaching them through how to interview for a job or other things, or what's next in life. But definitely miss those day-to-day relationships of growing with players, and being in that the heat of the moment.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, you still talk to Kim Evans, your college golf coach, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, which is amazing. It says a lot about her. It says a ton about the relationship you all forged, which was great back in the day. Well, golly, Courtney, this has been great. I really appreciate you giving me some great perspectives from the female side of college golf, but also just from a competitive aspect. You were a great player, a great coach, and obviously I think I really do appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it. Love all that you do for college golf, and love that you continue to share lots of stories through your podcast. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You bet. Have a great winter, and we will talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mike.